thanks for coming back again. In today's video, we installed the steering wheel column and steering wheel, have it mocked up into position. Got in and out of the truck numerous times to see how the feel was, and ended up, hopefully where it's going to be comfortable to drive. Future plans do call for replacing the bench seat with a newer one, so hopefully that won't throw things off too much. We also are going to cover installing the brake booster and the pedals, brake and gas. We did install those in about the exact relation to each other as how they came out of the donor car. They do appear to be a little bit high off the floor, but as I recall in these old trucks, the pedals were a little bit higher, and also carpeting and insulation will be going in, so that will bring the floor up a little bit. But they did end up feeling pretty good in the position that we put them in. So let's get started with the steering column, and then we'll move on to the pedals.
At this point, we have the steering column mocked up in place. Neither Dan or I wanted to cut into the dash, so I was going to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of space not to have to go into that dash. We went above the stock hole through the floor, and I'll give you a shot of that front end in just a second, but column sits in there pretty good. I've sat in the truck a few times now and tested it. I think I'm pretty happy with where it's going to be located for my driving. We did put the engine in place to see what kind of clearance we're going to have for the steering column. It's like I say, it's just mocked up, it's not fully mounted, but we came through right on the center of that seam. That way we didn't have to cut into that dash. And once we get everything solidly mounted, I think it's going to clear the O2 sensor and the frame. Dan thinks we may need to put a support collar in there just to hold that up off the frame a little bit, but we'll see once we get a little bit further along. Engine's in the car. A little bit of space behind the engine, that's not going to bother me. I'd rather use the stock mounts than try to mount the engine back any further. If we go back further, I'm going to have issues with the oil filter right there hitting the steering, and I don't want to do a remote filter on it. So that's what it looks like with the engine in there, and we're moving along. See you shortly.
So I wanted to insert a couple of photos here. We're trying to figure out how to help secure the column going through the firewall, just to add some support there. And there's some aftermarket mounts that I've seen where you can mount them to the firewall, and they support the steering column. But one of the other guys here at work made up this aluminum collar for me. It's going to squeeze the column and the tubing going through the firewall at the same time to provide support for the column, and it just turned out really well. I was really impressed with the craftsmanship that he put into this and made for the truck. So big shout out to Brian, I appreciate that. Let's get on to the pedals now. They're just mocked up for now. The brackets still need some additional support to make sure that there's no movement when we apply the brakes. Right now, the bracket between the dash and the firewall, there's about maybe 1/8 of an inch of play in it when you apply the brakes, and we're going to just reinforce that. So if you see it in videos moving a little bit, that reinforcement bracket's not welded on yet, but it'll get done. Here we go. Alrighty, here we are underneath the dash. Have the steering column out right now, but I wanted to show you we had to modify this bracket a little bit to get the pedals in here. So we're not done with it. We're going to reinforce it some more, but we did have to cut away some of the bracket. It goes from the dash to the firewall. Was the old brake pedal support bracket, which we had to cut away to make room for the brake pedal and the gas pedal here. So it's a little tight under here. Hopefully Hopefully you guys can see this a little bit. And see if I can get the brake pedal side in this video. Again, you can see that upper bracket there where we cut away for the gas pedal and cable. That's going through to the power brake booster. And let's see if I can do a little shot from up top here for you. Alright, you can see a pretty good view coming through where the dash bezel was. If I can light that up well. And again, we did modify that. We're going to triangulate it. Just kind of getting the pedals mocked in place. They do, if you first glance at them, they do look like they're a little high, but you know, some of the old trucks that I remember driving had the pedals higher. And we did mount them pretty much almost right on where they came out of the donor car. So that was about the spacing on the donor car. And mocking up some floor pans there, so that's why we got some paper down here right now. But the pedals are pretty much where they were located in reference to each other in the donor car, and feels pretty comfortable. Have a tube coming through the firewall there. That's what the steering column's going to go through. And one of the other guys here at work is making a collar to help support it and hold it in place. I'll show you the firewall side next. And here's the brake booster from the firewall side. That's the tube that we're going to weld to the firewall for the steering column to come through. And Dan went to the local pick and pull this past weekend and found this steering shaft out of Suburban, I believe it came out of, which is going to work pretty well for attaching the Crown Vic steering to the steering column. Got to do a little bit of modifications to it, and I'll cover that further once we get that ball rolling. Well, again, everybody, thanks for stopping by again. I hope you enjoyed the video. The next one, we're going to be replacing the floor pans and the body mounts. Originally, I was going to patch the pans, but when we opened up the driver's side, we saw that the body mount was really heavily rusted. So with that being said, the decision was made to buy new pans and body mounts for both sides and to get those done. So we're working on that as I speak. I hope to see you again on that one. Take care. Stay safe.